Remember back in Exodus when Moses was demonstrating Yahweh's power to Pharaoh? His court magicians showed up and duplicated some of the signs, or at least convinced their boss that they had. I foresee a similar scenario happening with these two witnesses, with similar results. Whereas their signs are given by God as a warning to repent, the world's powers will come forward and explain that they have the technology to do that too. No, it's worse than that. They have already come forward. A feasibility study presented to the United States Air Force back in 1996 was prepared to, quote, examine the concepts, capabilities, and technologies the United States will require to remain the dominant air and space force in the future, unquote. The authors confidently predicted that by the year 2025, they would be able to manipulate the weather to their advantage in the battlefield. The title of the study was Weather as a Force Multiplier, Owning the Weather in 2025. Their stated goals were developing the ability to degrade opposing military forces by doing things like flooding enemy-held territory to reduce their communication effectiveness and comfort level, in turn lowering morale, or conversely, inducing drought conditions, restricting access to badly needed local fresh water sources. They might remove fog and clouds, denying the enemy the cover of weather conditions, or conversely, they could generate fog or clouds to conceal themselves when the strategy demanded it. But normally they would make the weather nice in their own territory, removing fog and keeping their airfields open, keeping visibility levels good, and comfort and morale high. The weather in space was considered as well, with the goal of disrupting or enhancing radar and communications, intercepting enemy transmissions, and destroying their satellites. And here's the kicker. Part of the program is detecting and defending against our enemies' weather manipulation technologies. What? You didn't think we were the only ones crazy enough to ponder madness like this, did you? Did I say ponder? Silly me. Our military geniuses, and theirs, are actually building the technology to make this a reality. The Air Force report says, quote, current technologies that will mature over the next 30 years will offer anyone who has the necessary resources the ability to modify weather patterns and their corresponding effects, at least on the local scale. Current demographic, economic, and environmental trends will create global stresses that will provide the impetus necessary for many countries or groups to turn this weather modification ability into a capability. It goes on to say, in the United States, weather modification will likely become part of a national security policy with both domestic and international applications. Our government will pursue such a policy depending on its interests at various levels. These levels could include unilateral actions, participation in a security framework such as NATO, membership in an international organization such as the UN, or participation in a coalition. Assuming that in 2025 our national security strategy includes weather modification, its use in our national military strategy will naturally follow. Besides the significant benefits an operational capability would provide, another motivation to pursue weather modification is to deter and counter potential adversaries, unquote. You could just see these guys drooling over their shiny new weapon. I continue the quote. Appropriate application of weather modification can provide battle space dominance to a degree never before imagined. In the future, such operations will enhance air and space superiority and provide new options for battle space shaping and battle space awareness. The technology is there, waiting for us to pull it all together, unquote. The technology is already there? Of course it is. These military guru types don't risk their careers on wishful thinking and blue sky speculation. On the contrary, the military leaders of both our nation and our potential adversaries are usually conservative to a fault. They wouldn't promise the end of life on Earth as we know it, battle space dominance, by 2025, unless they were pretty sure they could deliver. Our scientists are so clever they have already deployed an electromagnetic weather-altering system called HAARP, H-A-A-R-P. That's High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, part of the SDI, the Strategic Defense Initiative, in Alaska, ostensibly to do wonderful things like attacking air pollution, especially chlorofluorocarbons, and altering upper atmospheric ozone layers. Not to be outdone, the Russians are fooling around with something called Woodpecker, their version of a weather engineering system that uses electromagnetic radio waves to redirect high-altitude wind patterns. The idea, apparently proven workable, is to steer the jet stream. But they've discovered that it could also be used to disrupt electronic communication worldwide. Cool, huh? Can you imagine the U.S. and Russia duking it out with these systems? Before long, other nations would be feverishly working on their own versions. Iran, North Korea, France. Actually, rumor has it that Israel already has one. These technologies are the outgrowth of the work of Nikola Tesla, who lived from 1856 to 1943. The Serbian-American inventor, whose discoveries in the field of alternating polyphase current electricity were foundational to our whole electricity-dependent way of life. His 700 patents covered such breakthroughs as fluorescent light, the wireless transmission of electrical energy, radio, and electronic remote control. Tesla discovered that the Earth itself behaves as a global electrical grid, pulsing at an extremely low frequency, or ELF, very precise and very constant. By artificially generating ELF waves at the same frequency, scientists could, he hypothesized, control all of the weather and tectonic functions on Earth. It's all a matter of harnessing the immense energy that's already there. Tectonic functions? Yes, that too. HAARP ELF transmissions have the potential ability to create earthquakes on demand anywhere we want. This HAARP capability was the premise of the 2003 sci-fi blockbuster movie The Core. In fact, the paranoid lunatic fringe of our scientific community believes it's already happened. They also see evidence that HAARP and woodpecker signals have changed our weather patterns, creating unprecedented rainfall or drought in various places. These same scientists fear that ELF technology is capable of magnifying and focusing sunlight, they call it sky busting, burning holes through the Earth's protective ozone layer. Hey, what a nifty weapon that would be! They say it might even be capable of controlling the thoughts or emotions of people by adjusting the ELF bombardment to the frequencies the human brain employs. These scientists may be paranoid, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're wrong. The holy grail of Tesla technology, however, would be to create nuclear-sized explosions without generating any radiation. It's a military man's dream. No missiles, warheads, or fallout. Just redirect the Earth's energy to some place you don't like very much and push the button. And poof! No more Baghdad. No more New York. Or Paris. Impossible? Well, if you say so, but you should be aware that this very process is now protected under HAARP's U.S. patent number 4873928. Now, my point is not that we are in the hands of mad scientists who will soon have the capability, not to mention the arrogance, to destroy the Earth while attempting to gain a military advantage. This may be true, but it's not my point. I just want you to understand that the divine judgments that are prophesied to come on earth are not necessarily all miraculously God-generated, like thunderbolts from Zeus being thrown down from Mount Olympus. Rather, the wrath of God may, in large measure, be nothing more than Yahweh stepping out of the picture and letting us run the world ourselves for a few years, something he has never done since he created it, giving the human race enough rope with which to hang itself. Yahshua himself said that
Unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. Matthew 24:22.
If Yahweh were, quote, throwing all the thunderbolts, unquote, I suspect he wouldn't have to make adjustments in the schedule to save his elect remnant. But even if Yahweh is pulling the strings of judgment himself, there will still be the plausible deniability factor. In other words, if unrepentant man can still imagine natural causes for all the torment he's going through, he will still be able to talk himself out of believing that there is a God. Delusion dies hard. I'd like to pose a riddle. In the following 4 passages, among hundreds I could have quoted, what late 20th century technology is being suggested as a condition for future prophetic fulfillment?
It shall come to pass in that day that Yahweh shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people who are left from Assyria and Egypt, from Pathros and Cush, from Elam and Shinar, from Hamath and the islands of the sea. He will set up a banner for the nations, and will assemble the outcasts of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Yehudah from the 4 corners of the earth. Also the envy of Ephraim shall depart, and the adversaries of Yehudah shall be cut off. Ephraim shall not envy Yehudah, and Yehudah shall not harass Ephraim. Isaiah 11:11-13. Fear not, for I am with you. I will bring your descendants from the east, and gather you from the west. I will say to the north, give them up, and to the south, do not keep them back. Bring my sons from afar, and my daughters from the ends of the earth. Isaiah 43:5-6. Thus says Yahweh, who gives the sun for a light by day, the ordinances of the moon and the stars for a light by night, who disturbs the sea and its waves roar. Yahweh is his name. For those ordinances depart from me, says Yahweh. Then the seed of Yisrael shall also cease from being a nation before me forever. If heaven above can be measured, and the foundations of the earth stretched out beneath, I will also cast off the seed of Yisrael for all that they have done, says Yahweh. Jeremiah 31:35-37. For surely I will command, and will sift the house of Yisrael among all nations, as grain is sifted in a sieve. Yet not the smallest grain shall fall to the ground. Amos 9:9.
Stumped? I'll give you a hint. It's a language, one we have just recently begun to understand. The very language that Yahweh used when he spoke life into being, as in Genesis 1:11, 20, and 24. It's DNA, the genetic structure of life itself. You're probably wondering, what on earth does the science of genetics have to do with the Jews' return to their promised land? Ask yourself this. What is a Jew, or more properly an Israelite? Who is God talking about when he says, I will bring your descendants from the ends of the earth? The simple answer is, all of the descendants of Jacob or Israel. Well, that's a fine definition in theory, but it gets a bit more complicated in the real world. Most people today can say with some degree of certainty, I am a Jew or I am a Gentile, a non-Jew. But the actual genealogical records that could prove it are gone and have been since 70 AD. All they have to go by is family traditions and histories.